Hello everybody, this is John. Welcome to the NCGA Valent Ag Weather Outlook, October 29th, 2016. Well, for many areas there's still no frost or freezing temperatures, primarily the eastern Corn Belt, parts of the central Corn Belt. This is getting unusually late without any frost or freeze, and that's showing that that cold air is still not really intruding down into the middle part of the nation. I think that is showing me that there's an underlying warm trend, and that's one of the things I'm looking at is when is that going to break? Is that going to be a seasonal trend, like some of the winter outlooks indicate, or is that just temporary and we're going to really change that pattern? So I really am focusing on that. Now the balance has gone from wet to typically dry. Now we were quite wet over the early part of the fall months, which was not typical for fall. And this little graph here shows the percent of rainfall in October that occurs. And you can see that's anywhere from 4 to generally 6 or 8%. So we don't get a lot of rainfall typically in fall. We've sort of set that balance, tipped it now towards the dry side with some exceptions, but that is normal for fall. Now I'm looking for those signs of early signs for late fall transition, and that would be more active systems, stronger intrusion of cold air, and then a secondary severe weather season. And I'll be talking about that secondary severe weather season in a post that I issued this week. So over the last 7 days, I'm pretty amazed. This really was a small area of rain, and it hit right where it was expected to, right in that Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa border there. A couple inches of rain in that area, and everywhere else, really hardly anything at all. Unfortunately, that's an area that has been wet, so it really occurred in an area where even though we had some pullback from those wet conditions, there was a number of weeks of dryness. It's still a bit soggy, and this is not going to help in that area. But if we look back over the last 30 days, this is where I say we've sort of tipped that balance from unusually wet to going over to dry. And you can see in the last 30 days now over the Corn Belt, a lot more yellow, and that's indicating in this percent of normal, that's below normal rainfall. Then the blue and the green is above normal. But look at that southern tier of the U.S. Wow, we're looking at percent of normal off the chart here. 5% or less of normal. The southeast U.S. has just been really hard hit with rain, lack of precipitation. That extends westward into parts of the south central U.S. and then into Texas and even parts of the southern plains. So one of the things that's on my mind that I've been really starting research is we're starting to get a pretty wide dry spell in here in this broad area here. So that's something I'm looking at here. Some signs that this could be an El Nino or La Nina pattern down in this region, but elsewhere that would not be the case. So soils, obviously, we see the strongest anomalies here over the southeast U.S., extremely dry soils over Alabama, Georgia, and surrounding states, and then that more isolated area of wet soils right here due not just to this last week's rainfall, but prior rainfall in the fall months. Now, temperatures over the last week were either a bit below normal, that's indicated in green, or a bit above normal, and that's indicated in the yellow and brown. Over the central part of the U.S., much above normal, that's at red, and that's going to be pushing over to the east this week. So here's this week. We have a very broad, large area of high pressure. Further north than normal, the jet stream, as we can see here with these shades of brown. So the story, at least for the next 5 days and much of this week, is going to be unusually warm weather, and in many cases records are going to be approached or broken in the area with the highest anomalies here. So it looks like very, very mild weather this week, and also relatively dry weather. This is over the next 7 days here, and you can see, like we saw last week, just a very small area of modest precipitation along the Illinois-Wisconsin border over into Michigan, and everywhere else very light precipitation. So I don't think we're going to be talking much about rainfall again this week, or snow. There was snow over the northeast U.S. last week. Southeast U.S., really nothing of significance. We could get a bit of very light rain, but really nothing that's going to make one bit of difference as far as the drought. Perhaps over Texas, a bit more precipitation over that region. Pacific Northwest looks like it's going to be the area with that onshore flow. focused moisture. That's what we've seen now for the last couple weeks. That's more typical this time of year, and that is what we're getting. Okay, so let's really focus on this pattern. How long is it going to last? Well, now we're getting into early November, November 3rd through 8th. And the primary position of this ridge of high pressure has sort of been right through the plains here. It sort of comes, this week it's a little bit further east. Now, 3rd through the 8th, it's going to pull back a little bit more. So we're going to have the warmest anomalies in this region right here, but you can still see the entire Corn Belt significantly above normal. Matter of fact, the whole country in this model above normal in the 6 to 10 day range. Okay, now as we get into November 8th through 13th, that's probably the first chance that we have some prospect of a change in this pattern. The ridge of high pressure pushes off even further to the west, and that allows a dip in the jet stream, and I'm sure that'll bring some cold front down and probably cool things off as we get into that period. But that's still a ways off, and when it's that far off, it's a little bit uncertain, and the average is actually in the 11 to 15 day range, still average above normal. But if you drill down into 1 day here, this is on November 14th, you can see we do have that colder air that has sunk down to the south with that dip in the jet stream. So we're looking at basically from now up until through the first week in November of well above normal temperatures. There'll be some fluctuation. There'll be some cooler days and some warmer days, but it looks like if we do get a change, it might not occur until we get closer towards the second week in November at this time. And even then, it's not necessarily a sign that it's going to last all that long. Now, as far as precipitation goes, if there's still harvest operations going on in your neck of the woods, here's week 1, very strong dry signal most areas. Week 2, even stronger dry signal. So it looks like when I say a strong dry signal, that doesn't mean no precipitation, but it does mean well below normal precipitation for both the next 2 weeks. Now, I've told you, I think I've used this caveat just about every week. Let's take these with a grain of salt, weeks 3 and 4, but it does show that precipitation probabilities are dry and temperatures are mild. So if we do get that cool down the end of week 2, maybe into week 3, right now the average, at least according to this guidance, is that it would not necessarily last all that long. That's way out there. I think what we need to focus on is basically the warm and dry for at least the next 2 weeks. As far as hazards go, we have some strong southerly winds forecast in this area blue on Halloween and November 1st. Other than that, looks pretty quiet as far as hazards. So again, the takeaway, I think unusually warm and continued dry for the next 2 weeks. Then with that dip in the jet stream, it looks like we could have some change. Probably will be very noticeable because we're going to be going from well above normal anomalies to well below normal anomalies perhaps for a while. That most likely will happen in week 3. So I'll have quite a while to give you a heads up on that. I'll be looking at that. That could change. The timing of that could change, or it could change altogether. That's way out there. So right now, like I said, let's focus on the warm and dry conditions mainly for the next 2 weeks. Some rain here and there, but quite limited. Hope you all have a nice Halloween and enjoy the warm weather. And we'll talk to you again next weekend.